Hello, I'm David Cross. I'm an artist and a reader in art at University of the Arts London. To think about collaboration, I'd like to consider how art practices relate to the aim of building common cause in the ecological age. Drawing on the work of scientists, philosophers, economists and artists, I'll do three things. I'll outline how the ecological and social justice crises are caught up in a crisis of perception. I'll align with a holistic model of dynamic cause and effect as described in systems theory. And I'll show some examples of art practices that could help build common cause. The term ecological age could mean the period when corporations and governments modify economic and technological development so that they have a lower environmental impact and are more sustainable. But it could also mean a moment of radical cultural transformation, informed by the insights of ecofeminism, ecosophy, and systems theory. These show that change happens not through linear mechanisms of cause and effect, but through the reciprocal interactions between multiple elements in a whole system. In 2019, the United Nations scientists warned that 1 million species face extinction, and they called for transformative change, which they define as a fundamental, system-wide reorganization across technological, economic and social factors, including paradigms, goals and values. Well, clearly such a reorganization can't be achieved by individual actions, much less through any single idea or approach. But with mass extinction threatening the basis of life on Earth, why is it so hard to unite people in collective action? Well, one possibility is that systems of social domination are dividing people by driving inequality. In 1982, Fritjof Capra identified these systems of social domination, which include racism, patriarchy, imperialism, and capitalism. And he showed that they are interlinked and mutually self-supporting. At the centre of these systems of social domination is the lone white male. The fictional character of Robinson Crusoe is an iconic figure of Western individualism, personifying the values of independence and resilience. But as Charles Boyle reminds us, before being shipwrecked, Robinson Crusoe owned a slave plantation in Brazil. Boyle attacks the promotion of Robinson Crusoe in schools, writing, "Long after the British Empire had crumbled, it was a recipe designed to perpetuate the racism, sexism and unearned entitlement on which the empire had subsisted." In this self-portrait by Giuseppe Pennoni titled "Reverse Your Eyes," the artist wore mirrored contact lenses. This simple act positions both the artist and viewer as transfixed by the image of themselves as isolated from each other. In his book La Révolution urbaine, The Urban Revolution, Henri Lefebvre charts the transformation from the town to the urban society, and chillingly links the rise of the commodity form to the emergence of an individualized subjectivity. While the figure of the individual divides people from each other and favors competition instead of collaboration, technocratic thinking separates issues such as ecological regeneration from social justice. Fritjof Capra proposed that the conceptual apparatuses of binary oppositions, reductionist analysis, and mechanistic models of cause and effect have led Western culture to what he termed a crisis of perception. I propose that this crisis is what splits the world from the earth. This 17th century map splits the globe into hemispheres, while joining scientific knowledge and religious beliefs. Sailing ships cross oceans divided by latitude and longitude. But where the hemispheres join at the centre of the map, it's embellished with Judeo-Christian religious scenes. Above are Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Below are God and his angels sending souls to heaven or hell. This montage of temporal and spiritual iconography envisions the European pretension to legitimate racialized colonialism, which Achille Mbembe named as the partition of the world. Through this partition of the world, Mbembe writes, Europe exercised a properly despotic power over other peoples throughout the world. The sort of power that one can exercise only outside of one's own borders and over people with whom one assumes one has nothing in common. Exercising that despotic power, British and European colonizers used slave labor and fossil fuels to deforest landscapes for monoculture plantations of cash crops like tea, coffee, sugar and tobacco, in the process devastating whole ecosystems and the lives of the people who depended on them. Recognizing the historical origins of interactions between social and ecological systems is hard work, but it is crucial if we're to build common cause and tackle the converging crises of the future. Whereas ideological splits and divisions favour systems of social domination, the convergence of certain areas of theory and practice can support common cause. Systems theory shows that interactions within social and ecological systems are non-linear, which means that effects are not proportional to causes. And they're complex, which means they're unpredictable. Feedback loops can drive whole systems towards tipping points of sudden and radical change. Recognizing that interactions happen not only within social and ecological systems, but also between them, allows us to see that causes and effects are linked across different domains and levels of activity, from the simplest of organisms right up to the planetary scale. Systems theory shifts attention then from the separate parts of a system to the interactions between them that make up the whole. In a paper titled The Resilience and Stability of Ecological Systems from 1973, C.S. Holling contrasted human interactions with ecosystems that aim for stability to those that aim for resilience. Aiming for stability centres on maintaining a predictable world of equilibrium, the goal being to secure a sustained and consistent yield of resources. In contrast, resilience calls for keeping options open, viewing events in a broader context, and maintaining diversity. This was a radical departure from the eco-modernist ideal of stability based on technocratic management and control. Holling gave the example of industrial fishing, which by trying to provide a maximum sustained yield from a fish population actually increases the risk of extinctions. Fast forward 50 years and giant super trawlers off the coast of Africa are extracting vast quantities of fish, robbing local fishing communities and endangering the marine ecosystem. In the 1990s, the political economist Elinor Ostrom studied common pool resources in farming, fisheries and water management around the world. Ostrom showed that under certain conditions, people can collaborate to form self-regulating systems to manage the commons, without state control or markets based on private property. In 2009, Ostrom was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for her analysis of economic governance, especially the commons. In 2021, the United Nations scientists who had previously specialized in either biodiversity or climate change began collaborating to explore the interactions between biodiversity and climate. This amazing workshop drew on scientific as well as indigenous and local knowledges, and it advanced treating climate, biodiversity and human society as coupled systems. The Stockholm Resilience Centre has done world-leading research on systems theory, and their research focus aligns with their method. They say, most scientists are hesitant of sharing their best ideas because of the fear someone will take them as their own. But in our experience, if 3 separate individuals share their best ideas, this will result in a 4th and 5th idea, each greater than the individual first 3. We invest significantly in creating a culture of collaboration. This approach is time-consuming, difficult and demanding, but it's very rewarding. It builds on openly sharing ideas and discussing them in teams with very diverse knowledge, skills and disciplinary backgrounds. From this collaborative method of sharing ideas, the Stockholm Resilience Centre developed a breakthrough concept of planetary boundaries in the Earth's system. While the red and amber zones show ecological overshoot, the green zone shows a safe operating space for humanity. But pretending that the climate and biodiversity crises are separate is big business. For example, mining corporations use the surging demand for renewable electricity to justify increasing the extraction of minerals for a whole range of other uses. This photo, which I hired from Getty Images, denotes the ecocidal scale of mineral extraction. But it also carries connotations of the unequal power relations between capital and labour, and between the multinational corporations and the formerly colonised nations of Africa. At UAL, I became troubled to realise that most of the people engaged with the climate and ecological crisis were white, while most of the people engaged in anti-racism and decolonisation were people of colour. So I worked with my colleague Rahul Patel to bring together artists, designers and educators, including those from the Global South, to ask, how might transformative pedagogies and anti-racist practices help to integrate regenerative ecologies and restorative justice? And we are encouraged to focus on the interactions between decolonisation and decarbonisation. Decolonisation, as Eve Tuck and Kei Wayne Yang have argued, is not a metaphor. It's the concrete historical process of dismantling colonialism and its legacy of structural injustice that continues to mark the world today. Decarbonisation is the project of ending all use of fossil fuels and of removing carbon that has been dumped in the atmosphere and oceans since the Industrial Revolution. And the point is to reduce temperatures and stabilise the climate so as to maintain the conditions for life on Earth. Decarbonisation is presented as a technical challenge, but it's inseparable from ethical questions around the distribution of risks and benefits, which is a key determinant of climate justice. This graph from the Statistical Review of World Energy by British Petroleum shows world energy consumption per capita by region. 2 lines on this graph stand out. The green one at the top showing energy consumption in North America, and the red line at the bottom showing energy consumption in Africa. If the story of modernity is one of material progress for all humanity, this flat line tells another story of domination and dispossession through racist neocolonialism. As Hans Haacke and Pierre Bourdieu have shown, harmful corporations maintain their public reputation or social license to operate by sponsoring museums and galleries which are highly valued by influential social elites. Museums and galleries can propel or block artists' careers. But when artists mobilise their cultural capital together, their collective power can shift national institutions and multinational corporations. For example, after years of high-profile campaigns by groups Art Not Oil and Liberate Tate, British Petroleum finally ended its sponsorship of the Tate Gallery in London. While the institutions of art and education are key elements of the contemporary art world, so too are art's material practices. In my artistic collaboration as Cornford and Cross, I photographed our installations and events, and we had the photographs mounted on aluminium panels for display in art fairs and galleries. In London, the property boom produced by the concentration of global capital means that storage space for artworks costs a fortune. We couldn't get our artworks into my flat as they wouldn't fit in the lift or go up the stairs, so they had to be stored in Matthew's flat. One day, Matthew had had enough, and he was aiming to throw the works over the balcony into a skip below. I was mortified. What if someone recognised our work in the trash? If we didn't value it, how could we expect anyone else to? As an artist, I argued that we owed it to ourselves to protect whatever reputation we had by removing the photographs from their supports. And as an environmentalist, I insisted that we had to at least recycle the aluminium, which is economically valuable and ecologically harmful. From deforestation to high energy consumption, the extraction of aluminium from the mineral bauxite causes phenomenal damage to the planet. And that damage usually impacts on the world's most vulnerable people, especially indigenous tribes such as the people of the Dongria Khond, whose name means protectors of streams. Their culture faced obliteration from a bauxite mine on their ancestral land. In this case, though, the indigenous people took on the giant Vedanta Corporation and won. After many years of collaboration, Matthew Cornford and I began dismantling our collaborative practice by taking apart the works we had made, peeling off the photographs from their aluminium substrates. By destroying one set of artworks, we made another, which we titled Afterimage. Matthew viewed it in relation to the formal qualities of minimalism, whereas I viewed it more in relation to the institutional critique after conceptualism. Like an agreement to disagree, our new work embodied both a common ground and a contested field. By removing photographs to reveal their aluminium substrates, Afterimage linked the material practices of contemporary art with the extractivist infrastructure of neoliberal globalization. By acknowledging that white privilege is in debt to indigenous peoples, the project pointed to a possible common cause between contemporary art and ecological justice. For the climate justice discussions that I organised with Rahul Patel last year, the designer and activist Daisy Pearson made this banner. Daisy describes Who Owes Who as an open-ended provocation that seeks to unsettle mainstream narratives around debt, while raising the issues of reparations for colonialism, slavery, and ongoing exploitation and environmental destruction. Shown here in central St. Martin's, the banner critiqued the monetisation of education, mounting student debts, and staff precarity and overwork. The typeface was adapted by black type designer Trey Seals from the Argentinian women's suffrage protests of 1957. The letters were cut by hand from African print fabrics, which echo a history of colonialism that links Indonesia, the Netherlands, Ghana, and the United Kingdom. In Brixton, South London, Daisy used the banner to start conversations around debt cancellation and reparations in a community marked by the legacies of slavery and colonialism, but which is also a site of resistance, resilience, and black power. Hung on the condemned Aylesbury housing estate in South London, the banner raised questions around the housing crisis in Britain, which is the result of a system designed to maximise profits through exploitation and displacement. Xinyao Liu is a PhD student whose research I'm supervising at UAL with Dr. Edwina Fitzpatrick. Xinyao is researching how art practice combining community engagement and performative ritual might influence attitudes to fresh water during the ecological crisis. Focusing on the Red River in Cornwall, which has been damaged by metal pollution from an abandoned mine, Xinyao is developing an artistic performance involving local people. The aim is to collectively acknowledge the river as a conscious entity, admit to the historic contamination of the water, and say sorry. The film Here for Life by Andrea Luca Zimmerman and Adrian Jackson portrays a community of artists, musicians and activists in London who've turned away from the competitive individualism and instrumental thinking of capitalism to live an unruly life of freedom and creativity. This photo shows commoning as a creative act of resistance to individualistic competition and hierarchy in the university. Upwards force, downwards motion was a spontaneous performance under the concrete stairs outside the lecture theatre at Camberwell. The students said the work reflects their frustration at trying to influence such a large corporation as UAL, especially when it comes to tackling the climate crisis. It also reflects the general feeling of dismay at seeing large systems push the narrative of moving onwards and upwards into the new age of a so-called green economy, when any sort of capitalistic growth drives a wedge between people and planet. In northern France, a protest camp opposing a new airport evolved into the ZAD, a creative experiment in collective living. The camp included a bar, communal kitchen, workshops, dormitories, a first aid post, a bathroom with hot tub, and a communications office broadcasting pirate radio. Police tried for years to evict the protesters, but with massive public support for the ZAD, the airport plan was cancelled. The victorious campaigners could have gone back to their normal lives, but having formed a community, many decided to stay on and continue building the commons together. The ecological age demands a radically different way of interacting with the world and the earth. Ending fossil fuels and switching to renewable energy are vital, but they're not enough. Living well within planetary boundaries will mean dramatically reducing the amount of material and energy consumed, especially in the wealthy societies. It will also mean cancelling vast amounts of debt, from the national debt of formerly colonised countries to student loans. To explore how art practices might bring the idea of degrowth to life, I'm organising a free workshop at the Goethe Institute in London on Wednesday the 6th of December. We'll have contributions from the London Degrowth Collective, Global Justice Now, and the artists Dan Edelstein and Hilary Powell. For their project, Bank Job, Powell and Edelstein took over an empty building. Inside the bank, the artists printed banknotes. Instead of the Queen, the banknotes featured portraits of local heroes, leaders of the local food bank, homeless kitchen, youth project and primary school. The banknotes were sold, raising £40,000, which the artists used to buy up and cancel £1.2 million of predatory debt. I won't say more now, only that the project had a truly explosive effect. In summary then, the ecological age is an emerging period when people start to recognise and understand the dynamic interactions between social and ecological systems. From climate breakdown to extreme inequality, the problems caused by the industrial way of life are too large and too complex for individuals to solve. What is needed is collective action. Also, the benefits of a new paradigm can't be reached through reductive analysis and mechanistic models of cause and effect. What's needed is creativity that goes far beyond the conventional way of thinking. Moving away from the artwork as object towards art as a process or relationship, and extending critical practice towards collectivity and commoning, some artists and activists are already making it happen. Thanks for listening.